a copy of my credit card. So he pays his rent, his groceries, whatever. I'm able to monitor his spending. In the event that he goes overboard, I can lock that off thanks to features of Scotia.
Have you tried our new mobile app yet? Give us a try.
Scotiabank. It starts with you.
It's a simple fact. Nothing kills more germs on more surfaces than Lysol spray. It's a simple fact. It even kills the COVID-19 virus. Science supports these simple facts. There's only one true Lysol. Lysol, what it takes to protect.
So we're back, and as we await the arrival of the Prime Minister, let me tell you that our stream would be up live momentarily, as well as on YouTube, Facebook, and all of that, and so you would have an opportunity to have the discussion. The intent is for the Prime Minister to spend the entire 2-hour period on set with us, as we, from this location, overlook the Scarborough Harbour, downtown Lambo, right out to Red Rock and beyond. So the ambience is good. Good morning, sir, welcome. Young man, put on a mic.
That's it?
You want to tell us when we're on? All right, so we are now. So good morning, listeners, and good morning again to everybody. We are now live on air with the Honorable Prime Minister. Good morning, sir, and welcome to the airwaves, internet, and every other version possible, courtesy Radio Tambourine. Good morning to you, sir.
Good morning, George. Good morning, listeners. It's a pleasure to be here.
Prime Minister, I want to start from a little odd place. Our fellow villager, I know that you know that my mother is from Mason Hall, Junie Dennis, who was a National Sportswoman of the Year, after whom the Mason Hall Cricket Ground was named, passed a week or so ago. and I'm sure that you will join me in extending condolences to the sporting community of Tobago, the whole community of Tobago, and especially her family.
Most certainly, I know Judy very well. Her family was actually her grandparents were related to my grandmother in some typical Tobago way. So I know the family very well, and I was informed of her passing. And I'm very sad to hear that, and I would like to extend my deepest sympathy to the entire family. Our playground in Mason Hall, as you know, is named after her for her significant exploits. She was a pioneer in the women's cricket business. She was a natural talent, and she did bring us a lot of pride and pleasure. So we're very sad at her passing.
All right. And we are going to spend, of course, the large part of the time that we're going to spend this morning talking about the act and all of that. But there are a couple other matters on the national scene. Of course, we're in the middle of a pandemic. The last time that I listened to one of the press conferences, I did sort of determine in my mind that he was sounding a bit of an optimistic tone, that we have a little bit of a vision down the road that makes us feel positive about something. Did I read you right?
Yes, because you must remember, to appreciate where we are now, you have to also appreciate where we've been. You may recall that we started out in February with pretty much very, very low numbers when there was no carnival, and we surprisingly had the lowest number. And from March, we started seeing little upticks. By the end of March, we were really very concerned and were in a bit of trouble. And by by May, we were reporting daily deaths of upwards of 20 people. And this was quite alarming. And our daily infection rates were indicating a very high level of infection in the wider country. The community spread was, as it is, community spread, and we were reporting upwards of 600 persons per day. So we had to do something to stop that, because if we didn't stop that trend, God alone knows where the numbers would have been and the effects of that. So when we intervened and we responded, and we are now getting the kinds of numbers we're getting, and we're looking at the statistical forecasts from the experts in the Ministry of Health, we were satisfied that we were going in the right direction, but most importantly, we could not relent, we could not stop, because it could easily turn around and return to those kinds of infection levels that we had seen in May. So while we were optimistic that yes, we had turned it down, going in the right direction, we were still at relatively high levels, but satisfied that we were going downwards.
All right, so I'm staying in my position that we could be a little bit optimistic if still guarded at this point.
Yes, and we believe that, and it's been happening, as you've been seeing, we've been getting lower numbers, both in terms of infection confirmations and also daily deaths. Those are the two that we look at very closely, and the hospitalization. At one point, all of our hospitals in mid-May, all of our hospitals were pretty much used up. We had to add additional bed spaces, temporary and otherwise, to be able to cope. But now we are seeing hospital utilization coming down. So we are optimistic that we could take it in that direction a bit further.
All right, so let me fast break to recovery, because that tends to be my interest. I'm the guy who's sitting at the back of the room sort of shouting, well, what are we going to do when we start coming back? And there are some challenges that would be felt by the state, of course, but there's a potential for some challenges for individuals. We are supposed to be on schedule for return to property tax, liberalization of fuel, and we are hearing a lot about removal of subsidies on water and electricity. Each one of them is presented as, well, it's not that bad. But when you look at the cumulative effect on the individual, on the community, it could become seriously challenging, especially with the loss of jobs that has happened during COVID, some of which jobs may not come back or certainly would not come back right away. What's in your mind? Are you forecasting that maybe we have to have a much larger social safety net, more programs of that kind going to be part of what we have to deal with for some time going forward?
Well, you must remember that the first thing one has to accept, hesitatingly or otherwise, is that we as a country are in a difficult period. And we were in a difficult period even before the pandemic, because we had suffered significant losses of our revenue base in the oil and gas sector coming into 2014, 2015, going forward. And then with the pandemic, what we have had to do is to try as far as the government was able to fund the requirements to respond to the pandemic. Firstly, was to provide financial help to lots of people, lots of businesses. And because we were already in a budgetary situation where we were using budget deficits, which means you had to borrow to maintain what we were doing. When the pandemic came, the only option we had was to borrow more. So we have significant debt liabilities. When you have that situation, yes, you mentioned those increases that would possibly come at the individual level, but we have to look at it firstly at the national, global level, because if we are unable to manage that situation within Trinidad and Tobago, and we have to go outside for help, that help will bring with it the kinds of conditionalities on those matters you mentioned. For example, let me put it straight up. If we are unable to take those decisions at our own pace in the country, like you mentioned property tax, you mentioned price increases for fuel and water and so on. If we are unwilling or unable to manage those increases ourselves, then we will have financial difficulties that will cause us to have to go outside for help. And that outside is IMF, because that is the place you go when you run out of your own ability to manage it. Once we end up in that situation, then what the IMF program will do is to force us to make those increases, but in a structured and short period of time. For example, if we find ourselves needing money to pay our debt, we have to go to the IMF if we're facing default. The IMF is going to say to us, your water rate is too low. Your electricity rate is too low. You have too many public servants on your payroll. You have too many social programs. And to get this money from us, which is available, you need to cut this, cut that, cut that, cut that. And yes, we need that money. And like other countries, we agree to do those. That's called a structural adjustment program. So we have a very large public service in Trinidad and Tobago. A lot of people, and you here in Tobago, you know that, because many people in Tobago work for the government more than anybody else. In Trinidad, we have the same thing. So Trinidad and Tobago has because the government provides a lot of services of one kind or another, a lot of people are on the government payroll. And also, if we take the position as we've taken for the last 10 years or so, that we're not going to charge people any property tax, you go to the IMF and they will say, but how could you forego billions of dollars in taxes for people who have assets and are getting the benefit of the state? But Trinidad and Tobago is the only country I know in the Commonwealth or in Western democracies where you can have property, getting the benefit of the state support for your property, and you pay not a cent in property tax. Before we called it land and building tax because we grew up with that. But political expediency caused our country to not have, even though the tax is on the books, it's a law, it's not being enforced. And there's a tremendous fight not to have it paid. The IMF is not going to lend us money to enjoy that. If we were, as a matter of fact, this month, coming of July, in our structured, in-house, in-country arrangement, we were aiming to liberalize fuel prices, where the subsidy would have been eliminated, and you would pay for your fuel based on what is happening in the marketplace. So if you have a BMW or a Prado or whatever, the government shouldn't be helping you to pay the fuel price. But there are lots of other people who might need that help, and the national transportation system need that help to keep prices down in the country. But look at what has happened. We are in the middle of very, very difficult situation, very, very difficult at the personal level. So the government is going to have to look now to see whether we go ahead and liberalize now and bring that increase on now, or whether we slow it down for the time being. But we have to look at it, because our intention is to make the changes in a manageable and bearable way. But if we find ourselves having to look for outside...
But that might have been easier if we didn't have to deal with the pandemic.
Yes, because the pandemic has created excessive pressure on people, and the government is cognizant of that. But we cannot evade the point that we have to deal with the fuel subsidy. I mean, you would have seen about WASA, right? We struggled with WASA in a way for a while, and then we did a comprehensive review of the situation at WASA. And you saw what came out of the WASA report, right? Mm-hmm. It's about $2 billion a year we have to put into WASA to keep it where it is there now. I mean, in many places, people don't get water, they don't get a good supply, there are excesses, there's waste, there's corruption, but the bottom line is, water has to be made available every day. And therefore, the first thing the government has to do is to keep it going. That subsidy is in place, but we are in the business now, restructuring it, coming up with a new arrangement that will keep water flowing, flow better, and cost less. Right? And TNTech, you know, TNTech owes national gas. The power that TNTech sells to you originates from natural gas that is bought from NGC. And they convert it into power and sell it to you. TNTech owes NGC billions of dollars, unpaid bills. The NGC declared a loss for the first time last year from billions in profit, which has been frittered away by now showing a loss position. The question is, can the government see the NGC go into a loss position and pretty much be demised? We can't.
Prime Minister, in the EU, they haggled for an extensive period.
Sorry, I didn't hear the first part.
In the European Union,
oh, yeah.
They haggled for an extensive period, and they agreed to huge grants to some of the smaller countries in the EU. And basically, they sort of broke the bank and said, listen, this situation demands a particular kind of response that's extraordinary, that's outside of the normal IMF recipes and all of that. The Prime Minister of Barbados has shouted from the mountaintop
speaking for CARICOM.
On behalf of the Caribbean and all of that. And I want to really get to what we hear about, but I wanted you for a moment to sort of bring us up to date in terms of how we battling with these international agencies, even those international agencies that weren't very fair to us in terms of vaccines, that we have to say to them, we have to find some kind of internationally funded debt forgiveness, that kind of thing for smaller and challenged economies around the world.
Yes, but those conversations usually take time to be heard, and the responses usually take time to be to arrive. We, as at CARICOM, what you hear from the Prime Minister of Barbados is a CARICOM position. That's one of the positions of the CARICOM. We've been here before. This whole question of talking to the international agencies about debt management in small countries like ours. You may recall when Trinidad and Tobago was forced to write off debt for Guyana at the Paris Club.
Yes.
Those Paris Club positions were arrived at after a long period of discussion like this. But then an agreement was made, and then it was applied. We at that time, were a lender to Guyana. And the end result of that was that as a result of those arrangements, debt forgiveness came Guyana's way, and Trinidad and Tobago was made to write off billions of dollars of debt. I think the figure was $2 billion to Guyana. In the intervening period, things have happened to all of us. In our case in Trinidad and Tobago, we now have a debt to GDP ratio of 82%, and we've incurred significant debt over the years. Yes, the point you made, that leadership worldwide have now been brought to a place saying that we need new models to be able to treat with the demands of the circumstance and clear pathway for us going forward. This whole question of debt to GDP ratio, which was the measurement by which they manage the international Bretton Woods institutions, the IMF, the World Bank. They look at you, debt to GDP ratio high, so therefore you're in trouble. And then, but Japan has always been borrowing more money than other countries and exploded its economy in the 80s and 90s. The British government, a month ago, I think 2 months ago, abandoned its budget and literally free fall funding the requirements of the pandemic because that was a priority. So having done that, as we come over the hump of dealing with this pandemic, we have to come up with new arrangements as to how we go forward and what are our fiscal and monetary policies.
All right, Prime Minister, I think it will go considerably more smoothly if we take a break now, so that when we come back after the break, we start immediately talking about the THA Act and all of that, and we don't have an interruption in that. So we'll go back to the studio for a break now. We are talking to the Honorable Prime Minister this morning on Wake Up Tobago. Stay with us.
These days, there should be absolutely no compromise on clean. Your most trusted dry cleaners, Danny's Laundry, now has a new name, Real Clean Laundry, for service that's second to none. Wash, dry, fold, removal of the toughest stains, professional ironing, dry cleaning of draperies, and those precious wedding dresses and suits. Coming soon, button replacement and minor alterations. Heavy starch of servicemen uniform, going one step further for satisfaction guarantee. Monday to Friday, 7 a.m. to 5 p.m. Saturdays, 7 a.m. to 2 p.m. Closed on public holidays. Call 797-8077. Remember the name, Real Clean Laundry. Formerly Danny's Laundry. Sherwood Park Extension, Conwy, Tobago.
My wife and I got married young, had kids, boom, and then a double boom. We took steps to provide for the kids, such as term life policies with Tatil Life. No doctor's medical was required. We are both under 40. For as little as $35 a month, Tatil Life guarantees up to $100,000 lump sum if anything happens to me, and same for my wife. It'll pay off some loans and go towards the kids' education. Call 62-TATIL today or email life@tatil.co.tt.
Tatil Life. Insurance you can afford. Term life you can't afford to be without. Conditions apply. A member of the Ansa McCall Group of Companies. Together, we are family.
Rifin Master the tire Alex, but the tires them cheap. Tires for your van, for your car, for your Jeep. Price and service, so them cannot compete. Cause you know how tire Alex them do it. Well do it. 9 o'clock in the morning, as me touch road, me drop down in a pothole. But me never worry, tire Alex have it under control. That's why me I deal with the pros.
Times are tough during this pandemic, but have no fear. Rifin Master is open and has the best type of prices and service in Tobago. Rifin Master is more than just a tire center. It's more like a tire spa. Kick back and enjoy our free refreshments and free Wi-Fi while you wait.
Only at Rifin Master Tire Center, located inside George Street near Penny Savers, Canaan, Tobago.
Call the Rifin Master hotline at 660-TIRE.
Follow us on Facebook and Instagram.
Forget the tie. Fling away them funky socks. Digicel's got gifts Dad actually wants. We're celebrating Dad with up to $75,000 in prizes. A chance to win every week. $5,000 cash. 40-inch flat screen TVs. $1,000 Aldo vouchers. $1,000 Massey vouchers. $500 Detour Tech vouchers. To enter, top up $20 or more. Or pay your postpaid bill in full and on time. Promotion ends July 4. Enter now. Digicel. Better together.
This security tip is brought to you by Revs Island Safety Supplies Limited.
Worksite accidents are severely reduced when all of your staff are outfitted in high visibility clothing. In addition to correct fit, which keep the workers safe in their own space, it is very important that other workers or equipment operators can see their teammates. From chefs to groundsmen, Revs Island Security Supplies have a full range of neat and safe working clothing in a full variety of sizes and can have special orders made.
And that was your safety tip brought to you by Revs Island Safety Supplies Limited. Revs Island Safety Supplies Limited. We specialize in all makes of signs, banners, t-shirt printing, fire alarms, fire extinguishers, sales and service, CCTV, sales and service, safety equipment and PPE gear, safety consultancy and more. Located at Unit 2 and 3, TLH Building, Milford Road, Scarborough. Call 473-7755, 352-0804 and 766-7877 or check out Revs Island Safety at ymail.com.
So we back. And we continue our conversation with the Honorable Prime Minister. Prime Minister, you're in Tobago because you must have realized that there are people who are still to be convinced about what is proposed in the bill that's before the House now, the work of the Joint Select Committee. The Tobago autonomy issue, I'm a little bit more comfortable looking at it on a continuum. There was the first THA Act, there's a second, and then there is an effort to make maybe a big jump forward at this point in time. The situation is compounded by, I suppose, everything is at least in some way affected by the COVID pandemic, and then it's compounded by the fact that we had a THA election that did not provide a clear winner. It seems as though with the agreement of both sides, people thought that this was a good time to expedite the work of the Joint Select Committee and have a bill so that those matters are resolved, both the issue of the leadership in the House by way of election and the issue of a new act that would craft a new relationship between Tobago and Trinidad. But there have been a certain amount of outcry with regard to the process, particularly the recent process, and the ability of individuals to participate in the process, to see their feedback reflected to some degree, some reasonable degree, in what is before the House. So you are here to tell us. I received yesterday a minority report that came along with the report of the Joint Select Committee. It was presented by Ms. Jillian John, Rudenat, Indar Singh, and Dinesh Rambali as members of the Joint Select Committee. So they too appear to express quite extensively their challenges with the process. I suppose your challenge is to convince that the process is as rigorous as it could have been, and we should accept and move forward with the bill as presented.
Well, George, Tobago's issue has to be seen in a historical perspective before you can fully appreciate the current perspectives. Since 1899, this issue has been alive on this island of Tobago's relationship with Trinidad. I was born here, I grew up here. I know people who were farmers here who spoke about this, who lived and died about it. But let's bring it forward to 1977, when it became a properly organized political issue here. And since then, led by A.N.R. Robinson, Winston Murray, and others, in the political arena, it has been a matter that was alive in the voices of Tobagonians and been in and out of the parliament. In 1980, the THA was created to solve this problem, to put a relationship in place in law and in structure. And that worked for a while. But even as it is working, people were pointing out shortcomings or reduced ambition in what it could have been and so on. And then it went to 1996, where an amendment was made to the THA Act to advance this Tobago autonomy. And again, we accepted that, and we worked it for 96 to now, 25 years. So in the 25th year, we are at it again. But on this occasion, what one, if I take you up on what you mentioned, there those two people, you mentioned two names there. Three. Rambali.
Jillian John.
Okay. Those three people represent the opposition, right? The Joint Select Committee had 12 members. Government had 6. The independent, how it went, government had 6, and there were 6 non-government people, of whom there were independents and opposition. The opposition put in that minority report, and interestingly enough, raised the minority report in the context that they didn't have enough time. Well, our position to that is, how in heaven's name could you raise that now as your overriding response to the work that has been going on? This work has been in the parliament since 2018. It was in Tobago since 2014.
Oh, Prime Minister, let me interrupt. They have in the document referenced 2 letters that they wrote earlier asking about the time. They've also referenced Minister Shamfa Kojo, and the quote that they take from Minister Kojo is, I think Tobagonians would feel unsettled in moving forward if they have not been able to fully capture and understand all that is before us. So I really think this is a matter that needs to be ventilated, or the information needs to be shared, also because it's near and dear to the heart of Tobagonians. Let me tell you my own experience too, Prime Minister. I decided that I would participate in the process, rather hesitantly because I didn't feel it was the right time for this part of the process with the 6-6 story. The first person I heard with that was Mr. Fadi Augustine, the night of the election. He said, this is a good time for both parties to go to Trinidad and get what we want and so on. And I said, what's he talking about? This is a time, in my view, to decide who is in charge of the Tobago House of Assembly. But nonetheless, that happened, and everybody took that on. So when they were going to do the consultations in Tobago, I decided that I would look first and see how it went over the first few days, and I would participate on the last day. I made my request to participate on the last day, and the last day was cancelled. They said not enough people indicated they wanted to participate. I felt that if they had a contract that would allow people to participate on that day, whether it's 1 man or 300 people, I should be able to talk, and I'll be very happy to be the only person to talk on that day. I like talking. So that didn't happen. Then they said submit in writing. So I submitted. I wrote 7 pages. My carpal tunnel syndrome flared up for all the typing and so on. And I haven't received an official acknowledgement that they had it. More than that, it took me a whole night to send it because there's a typo in the address that they gave you to send it to. And it kept bouncing back until Minister Kojo helped me. He said, well, look, they spelled parliament wrong. You have to spell it right. And that is how it went through. So there were a lot of those physical challenges that got in the way of it. No, let me just say one more thing, Prime Minister. I was asked to review and edit the original document that went to Trinidad by former Chief Secretary, Mr. London. And there was a whole section in it that I had a lot of difficulty with. That was the issue of this people's house that was to be a second house that provided some kind of, I don't know, public restraint over the political house. It was removed, as I suspected it would have been. But there must have been some sentiments on the part of Tobagonians that asked for that particular element to be included. And I suspect in my mind, and maybe in my own writing, that there was another way to achieve that within the context of the way we govern in this part of the world. And there was not a replacement. If there was such a wholesale change,
that is not
do we
correct.
have a responsibility to run at it again?
That is not correct.
All right.
Let me just respond to all that you said. You can't refuse to leave home or cancel your trip because there might have been a pothole on the Bonaccord Road if you're going to the airport. Right? You negotiate it, and if you did drive into the pothole, you got to take it as part of the trip, then you might complain to the Department of Works, but let's press it. And let us not assume that what we are doing now, and I want to make this abundantly clear to fellow Tobagonians and the country, what we are doing now with respect to this Joint Select Committee's work in the Parliament is not in response to the Tobago 6-6 and the Tobago's internal issues. It just so happens that this long and tedious and contentious process has come to an end now. The fact that it could bring relief to the present situation is a benefit. But to say that we are doing this and we are rushing this, or we're doing this in the on the time of this situation and shouldn't be done, is to not pay attention to how we got here. This matter, George, started in Tobago in 2014. 2014 to 2016, it was in Tobago under the consultation process. It came to the cabinet, right, subsequently. The cabinet looked at it, discussed the nuances preliminarily, and took a decision because it was a package of proposals written as a draft bill, but as you yourself point out, on one aspect, the People's House matter. There were things in it that had to be adjudicated upon. So the cabinet decided to send it to the Parliament for two reasons. One, knowing the contention that arises in the political situation. If the cabinet had made changes as a cabinet, it would be ascribed as a P&M position and would not have been comfortable for some people. But we thought if it go to the Parliament, and those same issues and all others were dealt with by a committee of the Parliament, it would make it more comfortable for people to accept that this is a process that has not been so partisan, and it was more participatory. So it got to the Parliament, and it has been in the Parliament being worked upon since 2018. While this work was going on in the Parliament, including the Parliament bringing in expert outsiders as far as UNDP, as far as countries that have experienced this kind of thing, the entire public service technical staff, with the Parliament staff, and with consultation. This work was going on. I've heard people, politicians here in Tobago, in furthering the speech on their soapbox, saying, the matter has been taken to the Parliament and left on ourselves to collect dust. Nothing further from the truth. The work has been going on. And the Parliament on these joint select committees is not open-ended. You're given a period of time to work, 2018 into 2019. When the time expired, the committee report back to the House in full public view. We have done a certain amount of work, but we need more time to continue the work. The Parliament approved that. The committee goes forward. That happened twice. The last time that happened, I think it was either December or January, where the committee was close to the ending of its work and asked for more time and asked for permission to save the work of the previous committees And the Parliament gave the committee that permission to continue its work, but end it by May. This was in December last year. It was not, it was before the result of the election was known, because the THA election, which took place in January, could easily have clearly selected a winner, and there would have been a majority and a minority, and the THA would have been going on as normal. In parallel to this, it just so happens that the election in January ended up a 6-6, creating a new kind of problem, this deadlock. But this committee work, by the Parliament instruction, was scheduled to come back to the Parliament at the end of May 2021. When I came in January to meet with those 12 elected people, that is precisely what I said to them. You now have to find a way to work your way out of this 12-12, or you may find Tobago facing 2 elections. 1, if you find a way back to the polls here now, and 2, when the Joint Select Committee reports in May, the provisions in that committee's recommendation will trigger an election. So let us see what happens in that 6-month period. Well, we know what happened with respect to the 6-6. Nothing has happened because they weren't able to come to an agreement. So the law says in that situation, the incumbents remain in office. Of course, you could accuse the incumbents of all kinds of things, but the bottom line is the law says they must do that. So exactly what I predicted in January is what has happened now. The committee has finished its work, because it's quite possible that that committee could not have finished its work, and we wouldn't have been in this situation. You know, the committee could have said it's pandemic, so we're not going to Parliament, we're not working. They didn't do that. The committee worked.
There was a situation, for example, when documents were sent to people 8:30 one night with a responsibility to, or with a request that they respond by next working day. I mean, some of those things must have been very challenging.
Those are aberrations. Those are aberrations, but that is not how the entire consultation went. And I'll tell you something. There are people who will encourage us into analysis, paralysis on this matter. This is a matter of long standing, and I also know that it doesn't matter what we do on this matter, we will not be able to get unanimity. There will always be people who will have a problem with some of the conditions or all of it, and will not see the wood for the trees. And what I want to ask you now, since we are in this position, is it sensible to take the position of treating with it on the context of what has not been done, without treating it on the context of what has been done and what could be achieved?
All right, so I will take that as a good opportunity to take a short break. And when we come back, I want to move from the global conceptual thing to some of the things that are actually included in the Act, and look at them and see how they're being treated with in the community and in the public discourse. We take a break, return to studio. Stay with us. Good morning, everybody.
Due to the reinstatement of COVID-19 restrictions, our offices will be closed to the public. Customers with scheduled appointments will be facilitated via phone or video conferencing. Visit our online customer service center at www.ttmf-mortgages.com to make payments and request for an appointment, letters, and other documents. Documents for processing may be delivered to our drop box located at head office, 61 Dundonald Street, Port of Spain, or email to your TTMF officer, or otherwise sent to info@ttmf-mortgages.com. TTMF, from here to home.
Hey Tracy, Jerry.
Hey Vanny, wow, you look
Different. The hair, the skin, and you're working out. Thanks. I switched it up. I moved my mortgage over to Scotiabank and got 3% money back.
3% money back?
Yes, girl. And I just kept on switching. New hair, self-care, a whole new lease on life. And Tracy.
But why y'all looking at me so?
Mystified by your mortgage? Make the move to Scotiabank and get a special interest rate plus up to 3% money back. Follow us on Instagram at ScotiaTT. Scotiabank, it starts with you.
Feeling safe has never been as important as right now. As a mother, I use Clean and White bleach for a powerful and safe clean, especially now that our home has become our workplace, school, and playground. You can trust that Clean and White bleach will kill 99.9% of bacteria and viruses. Clean and White, the power of safe cleaning.
Now available nationwide. Clean and White Disinfectant Spray with antibacterial properties to kill 99.9% of bacteria and viruses and eliminate odors. Distributed by AMCO.
The power of nature is within your grasp to strengthen your immune system and build your body's defenses naturally. Use BioStrath. BioStrath is a natural food supplement. It contains more than 60 essential nutrients, vitamins, and minerals that are known to improve concentration, provide energy, and stamina to strengthen the immune system and help with recovery. Give yourself and your loved ones what you need for your best immune system. BioStrath. Get what you need naturally.
Want to have happy pets? Well, don't worry. The professionals are here. Healthy Pets exclusive boutique and farm animal supplies, located at Panam Building, Crown Point, is ready to serve you. Check us out for a variety of gorgeous accessories, fashionista outfits, grooming essentials, toys, potty training supplies, medication, and much more for your furry friends. Great prices on feeds and chows. It's a pet's world at Healthy Pets. Open weekdays 9 a.m. to 5 p.m., Sundays and public holidays 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. Come in, we'll make you feel happy too. Delivery options available. Healthy Pets exclusive pet boutique and farm animal supplies. Come check us out today.
And if pets could talk, they would talk about us. Hey, Motley, give them the number.
774-5977 and 349-6225.
So we back and we continue our conversation. Prime Minister, during the break you said you wanted to mention something regarding the People's House, the proposal for People's House. I want to put it in a particular context. The Constitution of Trinidad and Tobago has some challenges. We've been talking about constitutional reform for a while. So if I was magnetized in any way by the notion of a People's House, I wasn't, but if I was, it would probably be because it spoke to a little difference from how we have been traditionally governed by our Constitution. And one of the arguments that has been made is that the Constitution as it is formulated currently should maybe not be a backstop for what happens in Tobago. Maybe we can go beyond the Constitution, because even the very document is asking that some changes be made to the Constitution anyways.
Well, the things that we are doing to advance the autonomy and improve management automatically require amendments to the Constitution.
Yes.
You know, there are different levels of amendments. You can have an amendment with a simple majority, depending on how serious it is. Then you may require a 3/5 majority, 2/3 majority, or a 3/4 majority. Some of the things that are contained there now in that document for advancing Tobago and disconnecting Tobago from the administration of Trinidad and Tobago and Trinidad, and identifying Tobago as a separate administrative entity, are so far-reaching that it requires a 3/4 majority. So there are two bills going to that are in the Parliament now. One to amend the Constitution, first and foremost, to allow the creation of the Tobago Island government. And I think that is where the conversation should be now, not the nitpicking of little slides here or there, because this is fundamental. If we don't amend the Constitution, we will not be able under law to do most of the things that we want to do that are before the Parliament now. So the first thing is, do we have the support in the Parliament to amend the Constitution in that way? It requires a 3/4 majority. That means you require 31 people in the Parliament to vote for it. The government that I lead, the party that I lead, we have 22 of those votes. It requires 9 more votes, which can only come from the opposition, to say, yes, we agree to amend the Constitution. And that amendment to the Constitution will open the door for a lot of what we are talking about there. Because if we don't do that, the door is closed. And therefore, people who are concerned about other matters are missing the big issue. And when I see 3 opposition members, one of whom is a Tobagonian.
Doesn't lead to hope.
When I see 3 opposition members there taking the position that they are not happy with the report of the committee that they sat on for the last how many years, coming to a concluded end where the parliament gave the committee that end, you know. The parliament said, you have until May. So why are members, instead of facilitating that, why are they coming now to put obstruction in the way and could simply write a minority report saying, well, we're not happy with how it has gone because one day in the week rain fell. That is, but I tell Tobago something else too. Do not be surprised by that, because that is how this opposition has dealt with all matters in the parliament. As a matter of fact, the next time we meet in the parliament when I go back to Trinidad, we are going to be dealing with the gambling and gaming bill, which is the bill to regulate casino gambling in this country. That bill was put in parliament by the UNC. Then they lost the election. We came in. The very bill that they put in the parliament, which we are now prepared to support, has been in the parliament now for 6 years and they wouldn't support it. It is now being put back to the parliament, changed by us, so we can pass it without the majority that it was required. So it's going to be a weaker bill, but we can't get a stronger one because the opposition is not supporting its own bill that it put in the parliament.
Well,
and therefore, people in Tobago, if you want what is being offered now by the proposals of the Joint Select Committee that worked in the parliament since 2018, you are to take issue with committee members and the opposition putting in a minority report now to scuttle the work of the Joint Select Committee. And what Tobagonians should be doing now, instead of quarreling among ourselves, is to be saying to the opposition, the bell has rung on this matter. And therefore, if you are prepared to advance the country and put Tobago in a position to make its major contribution to the country, this minority report is to be rejected. And what we should do is to take what the majority report says, get the passage, and let this be a quantum leap for Tobago and for Trinidad and Tobago. Because the alternative is this. If they follow that minority report and they don't provide us with the 9 votes needed to change the constitution, there is precious little that the PNM and the government can do. They would have killed it. And we would remain with the THA Act that we have now for as long as the time immemorial, because the power to change it would have been stopped in the parliament. And I want Tobagonians to understand that. And shouting at the PNM, shouting at the Prime Minister, taking up minor issues, you're missing the point. The point is that we need opposition support to change the constitution to give Tobago even those said things that you think you didn't get enough of. You wouldn't get any of it if the opposition does not vote for the constitutional changes we require in the parliament.
So, to the content, there's a bit of language used in the bill that describes for Tobago exclusive administrative responsibility. And in Trinidad and Tobago, we have historically divided public service space and government space using the terms administration and policy making. The argument that was presented to me by somebody who's asked me to ask you this is, why is the term administrative responsibility? Does that mean that the Tobago House of Assembly would only be charged with the responsibility to carry out administratively policy that comes from Trinidad?
No, I think you should look at it the other way. What all governments are rooted in administrative responsibility as well as policy. Right? If you take it from the other side and see where, in the same provision, it identifies certain areas of responsibility that would remain with the central government. Those are identified. And then everything else that will come up in Tobago will be for the executive authority of the Tobago Island government. If you see it from that standpoint, well, then you wouldn't have a problem. But if you try to see it and say, well, what is it? What are we going to administer here and not administer the other way? It wouldn't be clear. But it is clear. For example, institutionally, the Office of Prime Minister, the Office of President, the Office of the Judiciary, the Ombudsman, and the Integrity Commission. These are institutions that will remain central government with umbrella over Trinidad and Tobago from an administrative and policy position. On the other hand, you will see from the administrative side, you would see immigration, foreign affairs, national security, except on-island policing. On-island policing will remain the Tobago Island government. So there'll be a Tobago Island police responsibility. But national security for Trinidad and Tobago, which is a much broader canvas, would be for central government. So these things are spelled out there. And these are what caused, these are what formed the conversations during the years of discussion with the expert, with the local people, to see how you craft this into law, to give Tobago the room, the space, and the authority to get done what you want done.
Prime Minister, I was going to actually do the math, but my math failed me a little bit halfway through the process. There's a proposal.
Whenever that happens, try common sense.
All right, and that's what we're going with now. The proposal appears to give increased responsibilities to the Tobago House of Assembly. It's a wider range of responsibilities. The Tobago House of Assembly has historically...
Not only responsibility, authority.
And authority. Right. Responsibility and authority. I take that. The Tobago House of Assembly has historically complained about being underfunding, and we'd have to really take any conversation about funding outside of the context of the COVID pandemic. Right? Okay. We're talking about a share, and if it's a small cake, it's a share of a small cake. If it's a big cake, it's a share of a big cake. But so that there is an increase in the funding to the Tobago House of Assembly. But if you have increased responsibilities, and you have, there's therefore, the increase in funding is therefore automatic. But I can see very easily that the increase in funding will be wiped out by the increase in responsibilities, and you end up back at square one.
Well, that is one way of looking at it, but there's another way of looking at it. The other way is, you see, if the administrators in Tobago, who are the politicians, see their role in Tobago as spending their resources in a particular way, and that way is not the best and most effective way of spending your resources, you will never have enough resources. That same argument applies to Trinidad. There are 31, if we talk about constituencies, I have been representing a constituency in Trinidad now for 20 odd years. We never have enough money. The things needed to be done in the Diego Martin constituency area, which I represent, and I'm now the Prime Minister. The things needed to be done there. There's always a requirement for additional funding. And sometimes you either have to wait in line, or you have to advocate in a particular way, or you have to do without, or you have to make changes. You know, Diego Martin West, which I represent since 1991, does not have a government secondary school. You aware of that? I'm the Prime Minister. I've been there since 1991. It does not have a government secondary school.
Yeah, but...
the Diego Martin Corporation is still in a house in Diego Martin. It is only this year that the construction of Diego Martin Corporation regional head office is being built.
Yeah, but Prime Minister, so to make that comparison complete though, Diego Martin would have to have responsibility for education. You don't, right?
So you want to tell me that...
So I'm saying that with the Tobago House of Assembly comparison, the Tobago House of Assembly would actually have an additional responsibility for whatever, say this police service.
It is not
right?
going to have any responsibility other than the central government has the same responsibilities for the rest of the country. And Tobago Executive Authority will have responsibility for that part of the country, which is in Tobago.
Right.
No more, no less. And therefore, the apportioning of resources to education. There's no child in Tobago which doesn't have access to a school place because the THA doesn't have enough money to fund that school place and pay that teacher. So let's not get down that road as if it's serious. If Tobago wants to do something out of the ordinary that requires extraordinary funding, they can look, while they're in charge of the assembly, to see whether you do have the funding to do it or whether you have to find that extraordinary funding. But those things they talk about, like help, right? Tobago has 2 hospitals for 60,000 people, right? Or 50,000 people, whatever the figure is at this time. There's no community in this country that has 2 hospitals for that population, right? And you know how that happened? Because the central government, working with the THA, decided we are going to solve the problem of an absence of a certain level of healthcare in Eastern Tobago. So we built a hospital in Tobago, right? And that is how development comes. Now, when you look at the offer in this Joint Select Committee report that's in the Parliament, it says, to take your point of increased responsibility and a greater share of the pie, we move the minimum from 4.75 to 6.78. The proposals were 8%, and the justification for the 8% had in it some makeup for something that wasn't done before under the dispute resolution. These matters would have been discussed dispassionately and arrived at 6.78%. I could tell you no. I do not know whether the reason for those people who wrote that minority report, ask them to say to you, could you say to me, yes, I agree with that aspect of it, 6.78% for Tobago, but I disagree with the consultative pace and the ending of the report. They just end by saying, my position is we need more time. But ask them which of those provisions that are in front of the House they agree with and which ones they disagree with, and they wouldn't answer because they are hiding behind that wall of simply saying the process doesn't meet our approval. But there are a lot of yes and no's that we can have for what is in front of there, and that's what Tobagonians should ask themselves. Do we have the ability to get agreement for 6.78%? And if you don't have that answer, then why are you fighting about 8%? Because if you can't get them to agree to 6.78%, they're going to agree to 8%?
Prime Minister, every Tobago minister, prime minister, president, probably has to defend Tobago at some point as being a burden on the Treasury. People, in yesterday's news, there was a representative from Trinidad.
I don't have that problem.
In yesterday's news,
I don't have that problem. I do not, and I do not relate to Tobago's issues as any issue of burden on any Treasury.
No, you don't have that problem. I'm saying that you have to defend it against other persons saying that. Yesterday, you were under attack by a representative over the cost of the ferries.
Really?
Did you hear that?
I didn't hear
that the ferries are costing $21 million and what could be done. So that's what I'm saying. So that's what I'm talking about.
Hold on, George.
That kind of attack.
Hold on 1 minute. I live that every day. I'm sure the person who had that problem with the cost of the ferry has no problem with SIS being in Panama now, running from this country, where the same cost of the ferry was given to SIS to build a water treatment plant at Beetham, which has not been built, for which there is nothing, for which $1 billion went down the drain.
Prime Minister, you're agreeing with me because you have now absorbed that particular attack and you are rebutting
but did you
and that was my point.
But it's still a free country. One of the things I
and people can say what they want. All right. So I am saying though.
I'm not just saying what they want.
I am saying though. One of the things.
No, not just say what they want. What they would have said and what agenda they may advance did not influence the obtaining of those 2 ferries by the Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago and the government of Trinidad and Tobago. And that's all.
But what Tobago would like to have, if you agree with me, is a removal of this notion that Tobago is a burden on the national treasury. Southwest Tobago is northeast Trinidad. And that's the area where most of our hydrocarbon exploration and so on is taking place. And a lot of people have made heavy weather in Tobago over the years about the issue of hydrocarbons. I am not a maritime boundary expert, but people say that if Tobago and Trinidad were separate countries, Tobago would have greater access to areas where there are hydrocarbons for exploitation than Trinidad would. So that means you should not pop up in the parliament and say, well, Tobago is contributing nothing to Trinidad and Tobago, because in truth and in fact, if there wasn't a Tobago, or Tobago wasn't part of Trinidad and Tobago, hydrocarbons would not have been available for the benefit of all of Trinidad and Tobago. And this brings me to one of the issues that was very much debated, and that's the question of a maritime boundary for Tobago. The first draft, or the draft that came out for discussion a few weeks ago, described Tobago from the beach inward. And the Attorney General went to great pains to point out that it was impossible for Tobago to have a maritime boundary beyond that. We would lose this, we'd lose that, we'd lose the other. But in fact, what happened is the draft that's before the House went from impossible to 8 miles. How was that? How did it suddenly become possible to have 8 miles at all? And does there need to be a resolution of this level of Tobago, at the very least, being able to claim credit for that part of its contribution to the national patrimony that doesn't put you always as if you are appearing to be mendicant in every circumstance when we start talking about money?
But George, this is an argument that has been raised by a number of people, either to propose or to denigrate. But it's not an argument of any real importance, because we are confusing some issues here. Those people who spoke of in the first draft, or the early drafts, about where Tobago's boundaries, and came up with, oh, it starts at the waterfront, the low water mark, and come inland. Clearly, there are other people saying that Tobago needs to have an international boundary between Tobago and Trinidad to be able to lay claim exclusively to you and not for the rest of the country. You have to have a hard boundary. And that hard boundary has to be one that can be recognized both locally and internationally. To try to do that is to do it not acknowledging or understanding that Trinidad and Tobago is an archipelagic state where the water between Trinidad and Tobago, wherever it is, belongs to Trinidad and Tobago as an entity. And what you can have, and what is being suggested now for administrative purposes, is that you have an administrative line so that if Tobago has administrative responsibility in the Tobago Island government, the question would automatically arise, where does that administrative boundary arise if you go out to sea? If there's a boat 2 miles out from Tobago, does the Tobago Island government have any jurisdiction or any administrative responsibility there? If there are boats, let's take a minor one. What do you call it?
Pirogues, fishing boats?
Pirogues, and no, even come closer to shore. Because I'm talking about
jet skis.
Jet skis. Mm-hmm. People using jet skis in Tobago. If you say the boundary and the authoritative limit of the Tobago Island government is the low water mark, well, a man in a jet ski outside there killing people could do it.
But that was the position of the Attorney General. He has changed his mind.
No, well, he was talking about asking those, he was responding to those who were asking for a maritime boundary between Trinidad and Tobago and a recognized international or legal maritime boundary between Trinidad and Tobago. We are saying you could have an administrative line which clearly defines the authority at sea of the Tobago Island government. And that is what that's what's before the Parliament now. And I think the figure we're using there to cover the fishermen from Tobago and other aspects of it is I think it's 11 miles. But that could only be administrative. Because if you want to go beyond administrative, you're going to get into trouble with the archipelagic nature of the country, which have serious consequences for our resources offshore. And to identify who has standing in the country because of what is contributed by that part of the country. Let me take you down to Mayaro. For Trinidad and Tobago, the people of Mayaro and Guayari have the same argument that you just raised. And they're saying, we here, this is where the oil and gas coming from. But some of the poorest people in the country are in the southeast corner of the country. I live that all the time because I'm in the politics of this country or in a political party. And I know the views of the people of Mayaro. And the people of Point Fortin saying the same thing too. And the people of England could say the same thing in London. You know the biggest piece of the English economy in London? There are two pieces of economy in London, right? The two are the largest pieces. One is Heathrow Airport, and the other one is the banking district, the London Mile, where there are 1,000 banks within a 1 square mile area, contributing more to the British economy than anywhere else in England, Scotland, and Wales. Those people who live around there could get up and say, well, listen, because this money is being generated in this location, I supposed to have more of it? Yeah? Because
well, why not?
Because you live near the Heathrow Airport. You're supposed to have more. Heathrow Airport's earnings goes into the consolidated fund. And then there's an equal sharing as far as you are able to satisfy the needs of children around the United Kingdom. It's the same thing in Tobago. The teachers in Tobago, the nurses in Tobago, the morning workers in Tobago, as they call themselves, you know, this is all paid for from a central fund where we all put into it. Otherwise, if you start talking about Tobago want to lay claim, separate and apart for Tobago's business benefit, what is in Tobago,
but can you
will get into a conversation.
But can you envision a construct where, as opposed to a physical claim, that there be maybe some kind of social compact and understanding and appreciation of that conceptually? Because it seems as though every Tobagoan population is putting their head against that particular
I cannot
notion.
force you to appreciate me. My appreciation by you is a matter for you. Right? And the administration in Tobago, running Tobago's business, being the eyes, ears, voice, and muscle of Tobago, will take its posture in the nation of Trinidad and Tobago. Because two things. You already, I'm sure you know, and you would have heard this criticism of the Tobago House of Assembly, that in managing Tobago's affairs, they have allowed too many Tobagonians of greater potential to rely too heavily on employment by the Tobago House of Assembly. And the Tobago House of Assembly has not encouraged private sector development in Tobago to take these people away from minimum wage morning work and that sort of thing, and to build a better structure of labor performance in Tobago. I'm sure you would have heard that, George. Now, whose doorstep do you lay that on? And who is going to come into Tobago to fix that for Tobago? That could only be fixed by Tobagonians with authority. What they could say is that we don't have the authority to do that or the responsibility, neither of which is true. Right? So as you're going through life, whether you're a person or a country, central government or regional government, you have to take certain decisions, sometimes unpopular decisions, to get good and beneficial results.
Will the new act, in your view?
Before we go into a new point, George, you did mention earlier on the point of the People's House,
yes,
which did not find favor with the committee. I don't want it to be understood that the committee rejected it out of hand. It was considered that Tobago has these two parliamentary operations, the elected parliament and a second parliament like the Senate, a People's House. It was felt that, given the size of the assignment, the construct, that Tobago could better use its resources, its time, and its movement in accepting that, yes, you could add to the involvement and the participation at the level of the Tobago Island government by enlarging it and bringing, instead of a separate house, bring a separate set of people by a different construct to meet those who have been elected. So instead of having the current one chamber elected THA, and that being it all, you have a larger body where you elect people, 15 people, and the presiding officer makes 16 in a house of 26. But the other 10, to give you what the people's house would have given you, go as far as to say, all right, you appoint 10 people by a process of the majority people who won the election appoint 5, the minority appoint 3, and the president appoint 2. So those 10 people who are not part of the political cut and trust and who can add to the house, instead of having a separate people's house parliament and run a separate parliament to have additional people, you have a larger chamber for good reason, because you mentioned greater responsibilities coming to Tobago. You need more people, and you need a larger deliberative body, right? And you need people like two people from the president, 3 from the opposition, and the government in Tobago applying to you. That very much somehow mirrors the national parliament, where the Senate plays that kind of role to a certain extent. And it also is a model that has been used around the world in the Commonwealth, where there are a number of countries that have a unicameral chamber which is made up of 2 pedigrees of members. And that is what is proposed in the House there. So it wasn't dismissed out of hand.
All right. You think that the Act provides the THA with the financial levers that they need to drive economic activity on the island? A lot of times, maybe sarcastically, people refer to the THA's budget as a shopping list, with very little attention paid to the earning side of it. Is anything in the Act, I've read it, nothing really jumps out at me that places a burden of responsibility on the Tobago House of Assembly to treat with generating, fostering, supporting economic activity in a serious kind of way?
Well, that again, George, would be a matter of the ethos in Tobago. Where does a government get revenue from, the average government? The average government gets revenues from taxes, or if the government has assets that generate a return. In Trinidad and Tobago, nationally, we get a significant amount of revenues from our assets in the oil and gas sector, and we also get a sort of revenue when there is economic activity. Those activities generate revenue for the government. Let's take VAT. You drink a beer, you buy something, you buy a car, you pay VAT. That's a government revenue stream. You buy a playway ticket, NLCB, you lose, you didn't win the playway, the government half your money, right? Because NLCB generates $1 billion. You have a hotel, right? Hiring people, providing a hotel service. Those people get to have a pay packet. They pay above a certain level. If you're earning over 75,000 a year or something like that, you pay taxes. So governments get revenues from taxes. So if you have a good, strong stream of economic activity in any community, this system of the government taking a portion of it as taxes generates a body of revenue that allows the government to do things. If you don't have that economic activity, but all you have is the need to spend, then you end up impoverished. Tobago's agricultural sector is not performing to its potential, but if it was, it would be a great source of revenue for all. If Tobago had more either larger in numbers, larger in size, or what it is, economic entities like let's say, a few more hotels, a few more entertainment aspects, whatever they might be, even a place to, if we are making movies and Tobago was a location that you have a movie made 2 or 3 a year, something like that. If we were into deep sea fishing and were able to catch a bit more fish and export that fish.
I have one.
Those kinds of things are what a Tobago Island government should focus on for increased activity, because those activities generate revenues and it also provides jobs and it also provides that self-respect that you were talking about a while ago.
I have one, the marina.
Right, a marina. Right, because let's take a marina. If we in Tobago invest in a marina, because of our location, just slightly south of the hurricane belt, statistically, we might get a hurricane in Tobago once every 40 or 50 years. But when you look at what has happened in the Caribbean, and it's happening more and more now with climate change, a marina in Tobago would have a serious pull factor to draw people to use that marina and to store their boats here during the hurricane season. Because it is a safer area, the insurance premiums to those boat owners will go down. It will generate insurance business here in Trinidad and Tobago. It will generate employment. And of course, it is something which is not happening now. So if it begins to happen, it will be an addition to your economy, and that is diversification in a different area of activity. We are now currently doing that to try to get that built at Cove, a marina. We are in the process of going through, you know, you can't just go and build a marina there. It's taking longer than we had hoped, but it is the area, it's an area that we have identified to spend some of our resources on. You have to get certain approvals, they have to do certain studies first and so on. That's going on. But I'm hoping that in the not too distant future, you could see a project at Cove where Tobago has a marina where you could fuel vessels. You know, right now in Tobago, you can't fuel a yacht. So I
haven't had a yacht recently, but that's why I hear.
Or if you don't bring your fuel on board, you can't get fuel in Tobago unless you lug it from the gas station and go down the road.
Yeah.
But there are economies in the Caribbean where one marina contributes hugely to the national pie. Antigua, St. Bart's, St. Thomas, Tortola. These are things that are potential to be brought into play. And if you have an aggressive, positive thinking Tobago Island government, along with the cooperation from central government, and an attitude of can-do, we could get there.
All right, so we'll take a break and come back. And when we come back after the break, we'll try to incorporate as much of the feedback that we've had by WhatsApp messages and so on with the Prime Minister. Maybe we might be able to take a telephone call or two. We can try that when we come back. So we take a break now, go back to the studio. Stay tuned.
Digital banking, online, RBC. RBC banking, online, pay your bills anytime. With RBC, it's safe and easy. Send your money hassle-free. RBC.
RBC digital banking is so easy. Granny and Granddad can do it. Bank online anytime from the comfort of your home. Sign up for online banking or download the RBC Caribbean app and start banking the digital way.
Digital banking, online, you can bank at any time.
Visit rbc.com/Caribbean/bank at home. RBC Royal Bank, banking reimagined.
Parents, I am sure you heard this before.
Daddy, I finished my schoolwork, you know. What I will do now?
Yeah, Daddy, I finished my online classes and I bored and we can't even go to the beach. So what we gonna do?
I have a terrific idea. Located at Unit 6 TLH Building, Milford Road, Scarborough, Tobago. Perfect time for family fun. Bring out the board games. Let's do painting. Play some music, dominoes, charades for kids, mastermind, huge puzzles, counting cards, and more. In this pandemic, don't let your child get left behind. Keep Keep them engaged in fun and learning activities. All your board games, storybooks, art, craft, music supplies. Check them out at Unit 6, TLH Building, Milford Road, Scarborough, or call 639-1224.
Yeah, Daddy! That was a terrific idea! Yeah!
Our new scented oils give you our best smelling scents, now crafted with more natural ingredients and infused with essential oils that are 100% natural. Give us one plug and connect to nature.
At Coates Optical, we're open for emergency services by appointments only. We're open for emergencies including headaches, blurred vision, red or swollen eyes, broken or lost glasses, emergency contact lens replacements, etc. Our patients are reminded that all COVID-19 protocols must be strictly adhered to. We are open for your convenience at 8 locations nationwide: Arima, Megastore, Freeport, South Park, Princestown, Siparia, Point Fortin, and Lowlands, Tobago. Book your appointment online today on www.coatesoptical.com or call 672-7577. Coates Optical. Value you can see.
It's the mid-year loan explosion, Mount Pleasant Credit Union. The mid-year loan explosion, Mount Pleasant Credit Union. You need a loan for holiday staycation, education, debt consolidation. Then check out the Mount Pleasant Credit Union for packages and get a chance to choose your own interest rate. Plus qualify for a chance to win a third prize of $2,000 gift certificate courtesy Laura's Passion. The second prize, a laptop courtesy Key Computer Solutions. And the first prize, a $5,000 gift certificate courtesy Rashad's. The promotion runs from March 22nd to June 30th, 2021. So call 639-8375 to make your appointment or visit the branches at Canby and Bonaccord or check. It's the mid-year loan explosion, Mount Pleasant Credit Union. The mid-year loan explosion, Mount Pleasant Credit Union. You need a loan for holiday staycation, education, debt consolidation. Then check out the Mount Pleasant Credit Union for packages and get a chance to choose your own interest rate. Plus qualify for a chance to win a third prize of $2,000 gift certificate courtesy Laura's Passion. The second prize, a laptop courtesy Key Computer Solutions. And the first prize, a $5,000 gift certificate courtesy Rashad's. The promotion runs from March 22nd to June 30th, 2021. So call 639-8375 to make your appointment or visit the branches at Canby and Bonaccord or check our Facebook page for more details. Approved by the NLCB. Special conditions apply.
There are different ways to pay your WASA bill or online customer portal, the WASA Services app, or customer service centers, and or third-party payment partners. So stay connected. Pay your WASA bill today.
Okay, so we're back, and I do have some WhatsApp messages, and we're going to try telephone calls as well. Good morning. The Prime Minister is starting from the premise that Tobago has been asking for international boundaries to be defined to Tobago. What we are asking for is domestic arrangements between Trinidad and Tobago. And I suppose you responded to that?
That is why I said an administrative boundary can only be administrative.
Another question, why not a federal system?
That was an option. If we were doing a federal, if we had gone to a federal system, what we would have been arguing here this morning is why not a system as we have here now? Why not this system? The discussions, when Ho-Choi Charles was carrying this discussion many years ago, alongside A.N.R. Robinson, he specifically had said that what Tobago needs is a federal system like what exists between Nevis and St. Kitts. I don't know that that has hardened as the position of Tobago, but once you have a federal system, what that does, it literally confines you to what is yours, and limits the role of the federal government in your bailiwick. Mississippi is part of the United States, right? The richest country in the world. They have a federal system. But Mississippi is the poorest state in America. Understand? It has its federal authority. It has its state authority. But it does not have an an evening of the sharing out of American wealth, as we have in Trinidad and Tobago in a unitary state. So there are drawbacks to a federal system. If you had a federal system, you could say, okay, where my boundary is, that is my state arrangement, and what is in here is my resource. And then I will contribute either federal taxes to the center or so. That limits your involvement in the rest of the country.
Prime Minister, the declaration of the Procurement Act was something that was done over an extended period of time, partial here and partial here, when certain things happened. If you recall, when the Tobago House of Assembly came into being in 1980, there were issues. Public officers sort of didn't know who they were working for, and there was confusion, and people asked to be transferred to Trinidad, and some people say they're not taking direction from secretaries and all that kind of stuff. Well, there was not a provision in law at that time for secretaries at all. Anyway, this was an administrative arrangement that Mr. Robinson adopted to be able to do his work. Is there, or should there be consideration for, in this act, there being a partial proclamation and timelines for certain things to become reality? So, for example, the Act speaks to a Tobago Service Commission. You don't snap your fingers and have a Service Commission exist. It will take some period of time. During that period, some people will retire, some people will be due for promotion, and all of that, and some of them would be in some kind of limbo. And I'm using that as an example. Is there a need for the Act in its entirety to be looked at in that way and say, well, this area of responsibility would be handed over to the Tobago House of Assembly when X or Y is completed, or by such and such a date, to make sure that certain things happen, but that you don't have a sort of in limbo period that ends up being more disruptive than useful?
That is a very important aspect of understanding how, once the law is passed, how it will be operationalized. And provision will be made for smooth operationalization of what the Parliament has said should be. Because the passage of an act into law doesn't always mean that as soon as it has been gavelled in the Parliament, has been passed on a vote, that it comes into force immediately in that way. There has to be provisions to allow a workable transfer of what exists into what is to be. So that aspect of it will be in consideration all along. Right? As you said, I mean, like the civil service, you can't say, okay, we passed a law last night in the Parliament, so as of this morning, the civil service changed. Right? That's why you have assent and proclamation, and also there has been the opposite end of that is laws have been passed in the Parliament, gone to the President, and never implemented, because the implementational side of things, right, the operations, turned out to be too prickly or too uninteresting. So this is not going to happen with this law, because we're going to make sure.
But our history.
But arrangement will have to be made for the various, is a rollout then. There has to be a rollout. Where you control the pace.
One of the issues that is, of course, in the news now is the whole question of adverse, well, has been historically in the news, adverse reports by the Auditor General on the operation of the Tobago House of Assembly. And having been employed with the Tobago House of Assembly during that period when the Assembly went from 1 accounting unit to 7 or 8 accounting units when the various divisions were created of the Assembly, I am aware of individuals who just came into the public service, never properly trained, and were promoted up the ranks to fill these positions that had to be filled. You had one, imagine going from 1 to 7, right? And nothing about the reports of the Auditor General surprised me, because when you operationalize in that fashion, this is the obvious end result.
Well, you are reasonable and you see the difficulty. Auditor General reports in Tobago are treated as I saw, called the police. call the police, which is just so.
Well, I think that police not popular enough in Tobago. So there are a lot of instances where maybe police should be called. Yeah. But sometimes if you read into them, you realize that they are administrative deficiencies.
Yes,
but
so
administrative deficiencies
so therefore you
allow
have to
for both inferences, and it also allows for the nefarious to get away with things.
You have to be able to see where these references to less than best practice arrangement occur. Auditor General reports usually require an explanation for what has happened. Mm-hmm. And invariably there is an explanation. And that explanation, if it's reasonable, you say, okay, well, we got to fix this. Or if it's unreasonable, or if it's fraudulent, then you know that there's requirement for police action. But in Tobago, you have this penchant to treat the Auditor General report as a loud hailer to call the police from political platforms. What has to happen is proper auditing so that in the operation, in the everyday work, there are people saying, hey, hold it, stop, watch, look. And this brings us to the point. You mentioned people being put in positions, being poorly trained and so on, or not ready for the job that they have been asked to do. Tobago has to be careful in receiving the responsibilities that they're going to receive and in protecting Tobago's heritage, that you don't take the position of Tobago only for Tobagonians. Because if you do that and you limit yourself, you will end up promoting square pegs into round holes, and you will get results that will form long reports of one kind or another. And Tobago shouldn't want to deny itself access to the larger pool of expertise that exists in Trinidad for Tobago's development. Once you take the position of limiting yourself, even as a country, there are times when we have to go outside of Trinidad and Tobago to get certain expertise, because even though we control it here in Trinidad and Tobago, we find that we don't have it, and we have to go outside. Tobago's population will have certain levels and quantum of skills, and a certain amount of training could go on and so on. And while you want to maximize opportunity for Tobagonians in Tobago, you may find that if you limit yourself, especially to specialist skills, that you could end up doing what you mentioned there, promoting people because the vacancy exists, but the people are either not ready or totally unsuited for the promotion that you've given them, and they end up in a job that they cannot do. So you're going to keep your eye on that. And as you give Tobago greater responsibility, the question will arise, how ready or how prepared or how concerned they are to make sure that those responsibilities are carried out by people who warrant being given those responsibilities at the operational level.
Prime Minister, allow me an indulgence that you might enjoy. At this time, or a little earlier than now, during our program, we do an international roll call. And I think it's important that you know.
A what?
An international roll call that you're being listened to in Norway, Nottingham, Aylesbury, Reading, Farnborough, London, Raynham, and Hornsey in the UK, Unterentfelden and Lucerne in Switzerland, Barcelona, Spain, Surrey, British Columbia, Richmond Hill, Guelph, Stony Creek, and Massasauga in Ontario, Chicago and Oak Park in Illinois, Kansas, Phoenix, Arizona, Mesquite, Texas, Charlotte, North Carolina, Atlanta, Decatur, Georgia, Lawrenceville, Frederick, Baltimore, Lanham, Hyattsville, Maryland, Washington, D.C., Philadelphia, Cranberry Township in Pennsylvania, Philadelphia and Cranberry Township in Pennsylvania, West Hartford in Connecticut, Dorchester in Massachusetts, Nonnet, New York, Brooklyn, Queens, Huntington Station, Northport in New York, Inglewood, East Brunswick, Wait, boy. Jersey, Gainesville, Seminole, Orlando, Miami, Hollywood, and Florida, Barbados. Roll call.
Well, at least that tells us one thing.
If you were saying anything that you didn't want people to know around the world, now they know, eh?
Well, I hope we're being listened to in Tobago because clearly we have an international audience.
As soon as you leave here, you'd find out.
And it only goes to show the extent to which I suspect that most of those people who are listening there around the world are people who have some kind of connection to Trinidad and Tobago. So we do have our tentacles far and wide. But I'm hoping that we are being listened to in Tobago because it is my expectation that Tobagonians will pay attention to the reasonable arguments that are being presented, asking for their support for what we're trying to do in the Parliament now. Because Tobago's future is now in the Parliament, and for the next few weeks, next few months, Tobago's business would be center stage in the country. I hope we don't lose the opportunity to make this quantum leap, because I don't know when it's going to come around again. And from where I am, leading 22 seats in the Parliament and needing 31, I know that there's many a slip between cup and lip.
We're taking callers on the telephone on 635-DRUM, 635-BAGO, 639-3392, and I will get a signal from the operator when we have a call for the Prime Minister. We are discussing in the main, and we have a caller now. Caller, good morning.
Morning. Mr. Prime Minister, we really want to let you know we appreciate the fact that you have taken the time to sit with us and discuss.
Could we have a little more volume, please? Caller, go again, please.
Yes, I wanted to welcome the Prime Minister and his initiative to be here with us, to really discuss matters of Tobago from a first-hand perspective. I just want to ask two questions, and I'll have both of them and allow him to respond on some generalized issues, that would be in the fore for Tobago recently. One related to the 6-6 tie in the Assembly and the increase in numbers, of the different representative areas, in order to remedy this. I'm just making a generalized statement. A lot of persons don't see it as a remedy, and they are suggesting that might be P&M stronghold areas that they're going to split. A suggestion was to keep the numbers, because even though you increase it, we could still have a tie if you have an independent person going up. Keep the numbers, have 3 independent assemblymen appointed by the president. So in the event that there's a tie, they would also have voting powers to select someone who would lead in the assembly. And 2, you spoke about marinas and things like that. And we also understood the benefit of having a major hotel chain coming to Tobago. But the main issue was the location of the no man's land. Why consideration wasn't given to the Annisville area, which is also in a sheltered area? You have the whole Annisville Hotel and the Annisville Estate for the establishment of that entity. Thank you.
All right.
Okay, those are lots of questions. Let me answer the first one that comes to mind. Annisville area. When you have in a marina, you don't only look at the bay itself. And if my memory serves me right, the Annisville area, there's a bay there. There's quite an active beach, but it's very rocky. So that's the first thing. Secondly, onshore from the water, you need land space to do things, to take boats out of the water, and so on. And certainly in the Annisville Bay, there isn't that space around that bay. So it's not an attractive location. And the reason why Cove was chosen is because it does have the potential for shelter if you do build a required breakwater, and then you have certain open on-land areas for the on-land business. Because it's the on-land business, not the boats themselves, It's what goes on onshore of the marina that is important, or very important. The next thing is why we didn't, he made a proposal as to how to get about keeping the 12 and having the president appoint 3. Okay, that's one proposal. And if that was the proposal, there would have been pros and cons about it. I just simply want to say, though, that the 15 seats that are now recommended in this report has nothing to do with this 6-6 tie. It was part of the recommendation from Tobago before it came out of the 2014-2016 consultation. It just so happens to have been there in the parliament when the 6-6 tie took place. And we said, okay, that part of the proposals from Tobago can be accepted and accepted immediately so that we can have that as an advance. Or, now that we have the whole shebang, that it is there, but it is not there as a result of any 6-6 tie.
All right. You can take another caller. Good morning.
Morning.
Yes.
Good morning.
Okay, I'll turn it down. Good morning. Yes, sir. Good morning, Prime Minister. Good morning.
Good morning to you, caller. Go ahead.
My concern is the multi-million organization like the cruise ship, the airlines, they closed down for about 1 year and 9 months. Why we cannot close the passenger boat in Tobago to clean up Tobago, because Tobago is separated by water, and we could clean up Tobago from this COVID in 1 month. Why we cannot do that, and why we cannot do just like the Delta Airline, the American Airline, close down the plane until they are...
Okay, so caller, what you are asking is why the ANC bridges between Trinidad and Tobago can't be shut down and avoid COVID in Tobago. That's what you're asking?
Yes.
All right, I'll present that to the Prime Minister.
I did say very early in the COVID problem, before we knew the extent of the nature of COVID-19, I did say that if it did become necessary for Tobago to have been shut off from Trinidad completely to protect Tobago's population, I would have been prepared to do that. And
you kind of said something that's different when you told everybody to come to Tobago for Easter.
No, but by that time...
If you had a chance, would you say that again?
But, you know, George, when I made that comment, there's something I said immediately after. If you go there, you would know that when I spoke, everybody who was coming to Tobago for Easter already had the ticket bought and were already planning to come to Tobago. Because you can't get to come to Tobago at Easter buying a ticket 2 or 3 days before.
Okay,
you know that. So that is just political old talk. So let me say this. We were hugely afraid of the effect of this virus before we knew anything about it, the novel coronavirus. And some countries have shut down part of the country to protect the rest of the country. In Australia, states were prevented from mixing with other states. Right? In the United States, for a period of time, you couldn't move to certain states if you had come from other states. So I had said early, if this is what it is, and Tobago could have been protected by being isolated from Trinidad, the government was prepared to do that. But then we discovered that it was possible to maintain some element of contact, right? And as I mentioned earlier, by February of this year, our management of the COVID situation was quite, to use the word acceptable, guardedly. We had a very, very low infection level, and therefore coming to Tobago was not a problem. But as soon as it became a problem in March into April, what did we do? We reduced the movement and flow of people into Tobago, and that is, we think, the best thing to do. Maintain some element of contact while reducing the mixing of the population. And I think it is working reasonably well. Tobago's level of infection is under
we have another caller. Good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Leacock. Honorable Prime Minister, good morning.
Good morning, sir.
Mr. Leacock, I'm tempted, not tempted, I'm persuaded to say this morning that we in Tobago here must consider that we must prevent ourselves from being tempted from those who want to shape a lot of nothing. I want to point out the position this morning that it was suggested about the history of Tobago from 1889. When in 1889 and even in 1962, when the Trinidad and Tobago government wanted to go to self-government and they went to England, the British government did not persuade themselves to change up anything. but give Trinidad and Tobago what they wanted. Why is it now that the Trinidad government must want to change everything that Tobago wants? Why that must happen?
All right, let me try to filter that question.
All I will say to that
but there has been a little bit of that what Tobago will get is what is given by Trinidad. You have addressed, and maybe we'll do it again, the question of the government of Trinidad and Tobago being the government of Trinidad and Tobago. But that is what the caller is referring to again.
But you see, when you're dealing with situations, there has to be a certain element of practicality. This is not rain falling from a cloud coming from the east. We as parliamentarians, an adjudicating body, and a body that will make decisions for the people of Trinidad and Tobago, the only place that what Tobago wants will come to Tobago is from the parliament. It's not going to come from anywhere else. And I am being very practical in saying, what do you expect to have in the parliament? As I speak to you now, in the United States, the parliament, they're locking horns over the issue of who can vote and who should not be allowed to vote. And the only place that is being dealt with and can be dealt with is in the Congress and the Senate in the United States. 200 and odd years after they've been independent. So this is not a question of Trinidad giving Tobago anything. It is the parliamentary process where the authority lies and the representation lies. So to not accept that is to upset yourself unnecessarily.
All right, we're running up on 9 o'clock quickly. That's our commitment. But so I'm taking one from WhatsApp and a telephone call and ask you to respond to both. Somebody says that the bill doesn't give consideration to Tobago's future generation's re- and exit clause. In 1961, at independence, Britain left an exit clause, and Trinidad and Tobago took it in 1976 with the Republican Constitution. Let us put it back in as a safety valve between Tobago and Trinidad, and we'll take the telephone call, and then you respond to both just in terms of time management. Telephone, please, go ahead.
Good morning, Mr. Leacock. Good morning, Honorable Prime Minister. I always keep asking this question. What is the contribution of Tobago to the GDP of Trinidad and Tobago?
Could you say that again, please?
What amount of the GDP Tobago contributes to the national economy of Trinidad and Tobago?
I don't have a figure, an exact figure, but I do know that it is much less than it could be if Tobago functions at its fullest potential. And I'm happy living with that answer, because Tobago makes a contribution directly and indirectly, and it will take an economist to sit down and actually work it out in the dollar value. But we certainly can agree that Tobago's potential is huge, and we would like to maximize that potential. Somebody mentioned a while ago about doing things. I just want to mention that development is an ongoing process. And sometimes you get to do what you want to do at this time, and you don't. And for example, when we talked about the marina a while ago, sometime soon we're going to have a marina in Tobago. And as I speak to you now, the cabinet has just approved, and work is going on now. That hotel site at Mount Irving, Rocky Point, which has been a hotel site for decades, and you were expecting a hotel there, and all kinds of things happen there. The Ministry of Trade, E-Tech, they've gone out for proposals, they've got proposals, and that is being evaluated now, and hopefully, sometime in the not too distant future, that site with private sector involvement would become a construction site of a hotel. So development is going to come in phases and stages, but if we stay the course, we can bring Tobago to its fullest potential.
Richard, you have another caller?
But I didn't answer the exit clause, right?
The exit clause, yes, yes.
Sometimes you can be encouraged to your own detriment, you know. I don't know that Tobago doesn't have an exit clause. That exit clause exists in our commitment to the UN Charter. We have committed as a nation to the UN Charter. And the UN Charter says that people have a right to self-determination. So if at any time the people of Tobago are of the view that they want to leave the union with Trinidad, that is available to them. Eh? So we don't have to go and write it in there and say, well, wherever you want to go, you could go. No, we're not doing that.
All right. So this is absolutely going to be the last caller. Good morning.
Yes, good morning.
Good morning.
Mr. Prime Minister. Morning, John.
Good morning.
Mr. Prime Minister, as a serious citizen and concerned citizen of Trinidad and Tobago, does our democracy stand where it is at this time? Thank you.
I'm sorry, our democracy what? What about the democracy? I didn't hear that.
We lost the caller? We lost the caller. All right. Well, Prime Minister, we certainly get into wrap-up time. And I have a number of questions that relate very strongly to the question of the holdover executive of the Tobago Assembly, House of Assembly, and its continued functioning. Some of the things that are viewed by some as excesses. I'm hearing about, for example, the number of decorative signs being put up, I love Tobago, welcome to Bon Accord, and all these kind of things, that a lot of people view as being outside of the remit of an assembly where there was not a result in the election. The argument being made in large part is that there should be some distinction made between governance and treating with those matters that were already in train by the past assembly or are critical and important for the everyday operation of the Tobago House of Assembly, but that you should not engage maybe in new policy and new projects, particularly because those things happen at this time without the oversight of an opposition, or even without it being taken before the House, because we did have a Tobago House Assembly in the past where the PNM had 12 seats, so there was no opposition then, but at least matters were ventilated in the House for the purpose of the public in general. What do you think about...
All I will say to that, George, is that a word of caution should be sufficient for the wise. I am not involved in the Tobago House of Assembly administration, so I don't want to use my office to tell the THA what to do. But I would expect and I hope that those who are under law required to remain in office would be cognizant and sensitive to these things. And it is a political environment, and if they do political nonsense, they will pay a political price. And I trust that they would be aware of that. But by the same token, it is the law that says that in the event of a new assembly not being sworn in, or until a new assembly being sworn in after an election, the incumbents remain in office. What is the alternative?
But Prime Minister, the law says 3 days, though. The president should swear in 3 days. It didn't happen in 3 days.
But the deficiency in the law, what the law should have had, was how do you go back to the polls? Because that is what is missing from the law. The law apparently didn't assume. The law had this condition where you meet and you 12 choose a chief secretary. Clearly,
but the chief secretary is not aware, Prime Minister, because he did say that we must now govern with restraint.
With what?
Restraint.
Well, that's
but he has not defined
what
what he has meant by restraint. And I've asked him on several occasions to define, and he hasn't defined what he has meant by restraint. But at the extremes, you can see things and say, well, nah, maybe guys.
Well, I'm saying that is a matter for those in office, but on the issue of them being in office, I know it is irritating to some people, but that is what the law provides for. And you only have to look at the alternative. If they walked away and did not agree to be in office, then who would be in office? Would you have been better off with nobody being in office? Come on, let's get serious. I know it irritates some people, but the law as it exists says it was the anticipation of the law at that time that 3 days would have been a good enough period of time for you to have the incumbents remain. When the same thing happens with ministers of government. In a general election in Trinidad and Tobago, if a new prime minister cannot be sworn in for whatever reason, the existing cabinet stays in place, even people who have lost their seat. So come on. I don't know why in this place we like to upset ourselves. Yes, you be concerned. Yes, you make us, but don't unnecessarily express yourself by being unreasonable. If you say I don't want them there, fine, good. Who you want there in the meantime, if there's no assembly sworn in?
But of course, in between the extremes, there must be a demonstrated understanding of that by everybody.
And that is subjective. I am going down the road properly dressed, feel I'm looking good, and you laughing and asking what the hell you have on.
Panorama has a winner every year, Prime Minister. But the judging of Panorama is subjective.
And subjective by whom? I mean, I come second in Panorama and I lose by 1 point. I have an issue with the judge. This is 3 nights you've been up without sleep, and you want to come and tell me this half sleepy judge make me lose by 1 point? Come on, Judge.
Prime Minister, it's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
And let me give you a moment to say whatever you want to say in passing as we go.
I just want to say to the people of Tobago and of Trinidad that this issue of our relationship between Trinidad and Tobago, we've come to a point here now after a lot of work. A lot of work went into bringing us to this point. And people like Orville London and his team, the chairman of the Joint Select Committee, members of the committee, the public servants in the parliament, those people who came from abroad and worked with the committee, they all worked in good spirits and in good intention to create this pathway for Tobago. And I'm asking Tobagonians to take and accept it, not with any acrimony, but accept it. It might not be satisfying in every single area, but such is life. Take the giant step we're going to make now, and a lot of the benefits to come from it will be determined by how Tobagonians treat with their heritage and their responsibility. And I'm asking Tobagonians to pay attention. Going forward now, what is in the parliament? There's going to be a very strong debate in the parliament on this matter, as it should. There's going to be a conclusion to it one way or the other. And then subsequent to that, there will be an operationalization if the bill finds favor with the parliament. And if it doesn't, the alternative is something else will happen. So in the next few months, a lot is going to happen with, about, and to Tobago. And I'm just asking Tobagonians to be reasonable and participate in the process. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So ladies and gentlemen, you've heard it. The debate will certainly continue. I have to express my gratitude to the Prime Minister. I also have to express my gratitude to Mr. and Mrs. Marshall for allowing us the use of their lovely building.
Fine facilities.
Fine facilities the Prime Minister describes. I also want to thank Dwayne Lyons, Miss Lisa, White Knight, Jackie Johnson, Excel, our video man, and everybody else who came together on relatively short notice to pull this together so we were able to do this morning. Gratitude to everybody, and to everybody who I forgot. You have permission to hit me a good cough when you see me. Good morning all. We return to normal broadcasting, and stay tuned to your timbre.
Thank you very much.
Aye, aye, aye.
This is a car insurance ad unlike any you've ever heard, because it has nothing to do with your car at all. Your car can be completely written off in a serious accident, and luckily, you survive. But the emotions and trauma of being in a severe car crash aren't things you can easily fix or just write off. That's why Tatil is lending our motor, property and health clients a helping hand with exclusive access to free trauma counseling sessions for severe, distressing experiences. So it's not just about repairing physical damage. Now Tatil is helping repair the mental and emotional damage too. For further details, visit the Tatil Facebook page. Conditions apply.